Welcome everybody to Schultz Auto Group and Schultz Chevrolet. We're so delighted to have you here. My name is Matt Kame alongside Tim Schultz and our partners here to have Congressman Langworthy here to talk to us about the CARB updates in New York State and how they really impact the consumer and us dealers. We're here for you and only advocating for you, and I can't wait to hear what the Congressman has to say. So welcome, Congressman.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you and Tim welcoming us here today to the Schultz Auto Group so we can talk about something that's happening here right now that a lot of people aren't aware of. And we're here to discuss what is a looming economic disaster that is waiting to happen here in New York. Last week I led a bipartisan letter, Democrats and Republicans coming together, urging Governor Hochul to reconsider her New York State electric vehicle sales mandates. The consequences of this sweeping, illogical mandate will be very dire for New York's consumers. Our statewide revenue will be hurt, and our important car dealerships across the state, which are important small businesses and job creators, and pillars of the community, frankly. I mean, these are the businesses year in and year out that sponsor all the different community organizations and charitable functions in our communities. Their bottom line and their ability to do business as is going to be drastically impacted by this. The aggressive timeline set forth by New York's electric vehicle sales mandate, the CARB program, does not comport with reality or consumer demand. And I strongly encourage Governor Hochul to reconsider the timeline of her implementation, if not fully repealing this mandate. The repercussions of this mandate on dealerships like right here at the Schultz Auto Group, along with their employees and their consumers, will be really painful. Let's start with how the mandate came to be. New York State, which is always in competition to go as far to the left as it can get, followed the guidance of another poorly run liberal state, California. And they took the mandate that they adopted from California's Advancing Clean Cars 2 regulations. But frankly, any environmental policy that's derived from Gavin Newsom in California should probably immediately be dismissed. But New York was very quick to jump on the Green New Deal bandwagon, and they passed this into law without a whole lot of consideration. And instead of following federal national emissions guidelines, New York has adopted California's regulations that require 35% of all new vehicles sold in model year 2026 to be zero emissions vehicles, with a percentage increasing every year until 100% of all vehicles sold in New York are zero emissions. This approach is, of course, far too fast and far too aggressive. Currently in New York, EV sales have really lagged. If we're going to get to, in model year 2026, which starts, some people think, well, we just started the year 2025. Model year 2026 will be on the showroom floor in April of this year. So it's now. And they are supposed to meet a 35% threshold. Sadly, last year, that number was more like 1.8% of total sales. And that's with a really massive federal subsidy of $7,500 per EV. Clearly, these targets are really misaligned with the appetite that New York State consumers have for electric vehicles. Starting this year, dealers will be required to sell one zero-emission vehicle for every two zero-combustion engine vehicle that they sell on the lots. This is an artificial manipulation of supply and demand, which is going to end up raising the price on all vehicles. And thanks to Bidenflation and the Green New Deal agenda, those policies of the last 4 years, the cost of owning a car is already too high. And we're just getting past the point of the supply chain problems that we had after COVID, where we now have the ready supply of automobiles. This is just going to exacerbate old problems and bring them to the forefront. New Yorkers will be left with far less affordable options, which ironically will result in consumers holding on to older, less efficient vehicles instead of upgrading to newer, more efficient and eco-friendly technologies. The push to force Americans into EVs is nonsensical and it's dangerous. It's a classic example of liberal elites thinking everyone should be able to just go get a $50,000, $60,000 electric vehicle while ignoring the realities of what is our rural way of life here in the southern tier. I have long warned against these mandates and the government picking winners and losers in what they will do to not only economically, what will those impacts be, but they're nonsensical on our region with our cold winter weather. And I think, you know, it's almost like we designed it on a day where it's about 15 degrees and snowing. You know, these mandates are being driven by environmental extremists who control politicians like Governor Gavin Newsom and Kathy Hochul. The technology is not there yet. The charging station network is not there for consumers here in our marketplace, or frankly anywhere in the state of New York, to be comfortable that, you know, they have a ready, accessible charging station nearby them. And it's forcing our dealerships to shoulder this burden that will have dire consequences. The technology is not there yet, and that's why people aren't buying the product. You know, I heard a term today from one of the dealers that there's, you know, consumers have range anxiety. They're worried. They're worried that the cold temperatures will take down the capacity of the battery and they won't be able to get where they're going. And it's not uncommon for our neighbors in our region to have to drive 40 miles to work every day. And if, say that, you know, the car didn't charge right overnight at home, what are you going to do? It's not like you can have a backup. You know, if government just followed what the marketplace was at, there's a huge demand right now for hybrid automobiles. But that's been disincentivized at the manufacturer level because they wanted us to blow straight from a gas-powered engine right to EV. Don't stop in between. I drive a Jeep 4xe, and, you know, it's got a small battery. Can't drive very far on it. It's 25 miles. But that is a bridge to the future, and that can improve gradually along the way, and I think, you know, be the path forward to when we can get to an infrastructure that might embrace EVs if that day comes. If this mandate is implemented, dealers will be left with large inventories of unsold EVs, potentially leading to layoffs of sales force and other employees and other negative economic consequences for thousands of workers employed in New York's automotive industries. You know, there's another, you know, concern I have here as a New York representative, is we live pretty close to Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania dealers understand this. They're kind of licking their chops right now because they know that they can steal the market from, you know, our dealers here in Western New York, in the southern tier. And that is a deep concern of Western New York and southern tier auto dealers, that, you know, during COVID, the streamlining of the process to buy a car online or digitally has gotten pretty slick. And those Pennsylvania auto dealers will be prepared to meet the moment. You know, the cold hard facts of this are, because of Hochul's mandate, the dealers aren't penalized directly. They'll be penalized in a lack of revenue. The consumer isn't penalized, it's the manufacturer. So they're going to make a choice because they'll be penalized by how many cars they sell above the mandate. They will be penalized, and if they follow through and just sell as many cars as they can in a state, they have to buy credits to offset with that penalty. In the weirdest twist of fate, and something that our friends outside would love to hear, the person that has the corner on the credits that they would need to buy is Elon Musk, who sells nothing but EVs. And this conundrum we find ourselves in will actually drive millions and millions of dollars to Elon Musk and his businesses that hold these credits that manufacturers like Chevrolet and General Motors, Ford and Toyota will all have to purchase if they sell as many cars as they can in New York. But the reality is they're going to send less automobiles into New York. And that is going to drive our consumers who want a specific car as they come here to the Schultz Auto Group to go find that car somewhere else if Schultz can't get their hands on it. It's going to be just like the problems we had during the supply chain crisis, where people were waiting 6-8 months for the car they wanted. You know, many people just got whatever car they could get their hands on that the lot had, but if you had a specific taste in mind, you had to wait for the car to actually be manufactured. We're going to be right back to that, or people are going to take their money elsewhere, and they're going to, unfortunately, take their money into our neighboring areas in Pennsylvania. And that is going to create jobs for them, but cost jobs for us here in Chautauqua County. And that's something that I find utterly unacceptable. So Governor Hochul must reconsider the EV sales mandates timeline, if not fully repeal it altogether. Allow us for a more gradual transition that's in line with the market and with actual technology and infrastructure. The fact that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle agree with me here should tell the governor all that she needs to know. I mean, you have to live in the art of the practical, in the art of fact. And the consumers are voting with their money. They're making a choice when they go buy their next car. They're not purchasing an EV despite the heavy federal subsidy that also comes to an end in the not-so-distant future. I mean, the federal government cannot afford to subsidize EVs at $7,500 a clip until the end of time. That's not a reality. They're cheaper than they've ever been, and the consumers still aren't purchasing them. So we need common sense to prevail in New York. That's why I'm having this conversation across our district today to bring this to the forefront, that this is a problem for us right here and now, and this is one of the many things that the governor needs to reconsider of bad policy that is taking our state once again in the wrong direction. She needs to understand that consumers are facing consequences, dealerships, small businesses are facing consequences, and employees are facing consequences. We need to repeal this mandate or significantly delay it into the future. And with that, I'd take any questions from our friends in the media.
Congressman, you talked about your vehicle that you came here with. That's a hybrid? I just want
It's a Jeep 4xe, and it has a small battery that the engine powers, and it stretches the mileage. I could charge it at home if I chose. I don't typically do that, but it's something that I have found a practical solution, and it meets the federal guidelines for a federal lease vehicle, and which the Biden administration they put ridiculous mandates on the federal leases, where I was given a list of cars. Now you represent a district like this, you better have a four-wheel drive. We had to put it into gear on our way over here from Olean. And we got to talk to our state partners. We'll do another press conference on the potholes on I-86 next. But I got a list of vehicles that I could choose to lease from the federal list. The only full-size 4x4 was the Jeep 4xe, because it was the only hybrid on the list. But the federal government would have allowed me to lease an Alfa Romeo and have a sports car, which I found, obviously would never do. That's an egregious expenditure, and that shouldn't even be on a list for any federal agency to rent or purchase. But our friends in Doge might find a couple of those along the way too. But I find the hybrid solution a good one, and I think it's one that a lot of consumers, in our dealer friends could probably comment on what the appetite in the marketplace is on hybrid versus EV. But I know the full EV is something that the Western New York consumer is having a real hard time getting their head around, because they're concerned that it won't fit the needs of them and their family.
I'm curious about, with the Schultz dealership here, how many EVs do you have on lot, or how many hybrids do you have?
Well, yeah, good question. It depends on the manufacturer. Right now we're sitting in the Chevrolet facility, so Chevrolet does not produce a hybrid electric vehicle. They only produce ICE cars, internal combustion engines, or fully EV cars. So right now on the lot, we have a couple. We have a Chevrolet Equinox EV all-wheel drive. We also have two of the new commercial vans that have gone all-wheel drive as well. Each store is set up a little different, like I said. The ones that are carrying hybrids, our Hyundai store has several hybrids on the ground right now. Our Nissan Subaru store across the street, again, they're only in the ICE and the EV market right now, but they are actually going into the hybrid market and making those investments. So we've actually seen a turn by some of the manufacturers, as all this has been coming out, to actually invest in hybrid electric vehicles versus going all the way into EV. So you're going to start seeing some of that change here very soon.
We ended up selling only 1.4% of our total sales as EVs last year. So even though we invested over $1 million in the Jamestown area in our 5 franchises to put the infrastructure in, train our employees, put the service infrastructure in, we were only able to sell 1.4%, which ended up being close to 40 EVs in the total market. So that shows you where the demand is.
So, and you're the biggest dealership franchise in all of Chautauqua County, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so Chautauqua County even lags behind the state average, which is 1.8. So the delta between 1.8 and 35%, you can see that we're not going to get there this year. So we're either going to limit the cars that people are going to be able to get because the manufacturers are not going to take a bath on this. Yeah, they're not going to send cars. They're going to limit how many cars that they send to the state of New York if this comes online. The governor has a choice. You can delay it, you can repeal it, or you can just watch businesses get evaporated.
Any sense of any pushback to her?
We'll see. She's got a lot on her plate right now.
My question, when you're talking about cost of cars, obviously, they're expensive cars. I think depending if you're going off of EV. But one thing on your side, I think, when it comes to federal government, is that how are the tariffs going to affect the cost of these cars when the cost is passed on to consumers? Is there anything that you're looking at, maybe that I think there's a 25% tariff on China. I'm not sure, what's going to happen once the 30 days are up for Mexico and Canada. What is your stance on what you're going to do about the tariffs and how it's going to impact?
Well, I think that you have a president that has protected American industry. I mean, we have the full might of the most powerful economy on the planet. And we've been treated like a doormat by the rest of the world for a long time, and at least the last 4 years. And even our neighbors didn't quite understand that we meant business. First and foremost, we need to secure our border. And if you can't get their attention just through straight diplomacy and talking about how important it is to secure our borders, you have to use an economic threat. You notice within about 6-8 hours, the tunes changed in Mexico and Canada. Mexico and Canada weren't just victims in this situation. Many of our products that go there get hit by a mighty tariff, and none of that gets publicized. But when we talk about putting tariffs on their products coming in that they have very protectionist, aims on, that just kind of gets ignored in the media cycle. But China is looking to get in, they're in with both feet in the EV market, and they think they're going to manufacture in Mexico because they don't want to ship them across the ocean, and they're going to flood our market with EVs. The president's going to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm concerned about all components of cars, but I think it also shows how important it is that we source as much as we can through friendlier nations and here in the United States whenever possible. And you see a lot of, I'm someone that it's just, I grew up here. It's kind of in my bones. I mean, my mother worked at Truck Light. I mean, I can't drive a foreign car personally. I don't begrudge anyone else that does, but it's just something in my DNA. I can't buy a foreign automobile. But obviously parts come from all over the globe. That's why we've spent hellish amounts of money to bring chips back to the United States. Why I think that's a national security measure, because we should never be held hostage by China again. I mean, they brought us a virus that shut down our economy, and then we were shut down from getting the technology that we invented and then started manufacturing there. I think we have to be a lot smarter about sourcing a lot of things that we can do here in the United States or in our friendlier bank of countries that we shouldn't have to slap a tariff on. But China has, thank God they're addicted to our money and our goods, but we cannot allow them to get away with what they've gotten away with for the last 4 years. So, I think tariffs are a weapon to use in any sort of economic discussion, but obviously everything has an impact, and we have to watch that. And I know the president is keenly aware of that, and he wants to protect the U.S. auto market at the same time. So that will all come into focus.
You mentioned DOGE a few moments ago. Since you're on the committee regarding that, I wanted to get a comment from you about how you feel their process has gone. Is it going too quickly? I know that Senator Gillibrand earlier today expressed concern over 400 layoffs at the FAA.
Yes, and I am not concerned about 400 layoffs at the FAA. I'm the head of the Aviation Safety Caucus. I mean, I think what is really important to focus on when you start seeing numbers of people laid off, how big these agencies are. You know, someone was crying to me yesterday about 1,000 people, you know, being laid off in the National Park Service. They're still going to cut the grass in the National Park Service. There's 95,000 employees in the National Park Service. I mean, the federal government's too big, too fat, out of shape. You know, you have entire sub-agencies. If everyone in it evaporated and the office collapsed in on itself, the American people wouldn't even know. I mean, and that's what I think DOGE is turning the lights on in a dark room to how they're taking your money and burning it. We saw the things in USAID that have been unveiled. And when Congress votes on the budget for USAID, it's a line. USAID. I'm picturing us, you know, the old school pictures of us taking bags of rice and food and medicine to Ethiopia and Somalia and those countries that are suffering. Instead, we're, you know, having transgender surgeries in Sri Lanka, in Burma. We're doing education on, you know, how people should, you know, be in touch with binary, sexuality. I mean, these are things that the American people shouldn't be paying for. They didn't vote for. No one in Congress voted for. But bureaucrats within an agency dreamt up a program with no accountability under the guise of foreign aid in support and decided to spend millions of our tax dollars on it. And millions add up. And that's the one thing that I'm very disappointed on in my time in Washington is people act like $1 million is nothing. But how many people in Chautauqua County's federal tax returns and their tax obligation had to be added up to get to $1 million, let alone $1 billion or $1 trillion? Because it doesn't seem like unless there's $1 trillion attached to it that people pay attention. So 500 employees here, 1,000 employees here, 4,000 employees here. You're not scratching the surface of the lard in the federal government right now. And, you know, look no further than the fact that, you know, the president had to send these people back to work. Here we are past 5 years since COVID struck this country. And you still have people acting like it's raging in the streets. Yet the movie theater's full, the shopping center's full, the football game's full, everyone's living their life. Yet we had to have a mandate in a presidential election to force 47% of the federal workforce to actually come back to the office. Biden wouldn't do it. If you didn't have to go into your office for 4 years, 5 years, your job's probably not too essential in the work you're doing. And we see it on the casework side. As I say to our constituents all the time, no problem is too big and no problem is too small. If you got a problem with the federal government, you need cut through red tape, that is what we're here for. And we do it every day. And we've got a brilliant staff that does that work, helping people with Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits, getting their passports, all of those sorts of things. But you know how hard at the beginning of my term it was to get someone on the telephone and get a call back or an email returned? Because they have pajama time going on at home. And that's not acceptable. And President Trump has put an end to that. And he gave people an out. If you don't want to, you know, come back to your job, you can get paid till the end of September. Don't come back. But it's over at the end of September. But right-sizing the federal government is, I think, the most consequential thing we could do for our kids and our grandkids to make sure we're not wasting their money. We're $36.5 trillion in debt. When I talk about us incentivizing EVs at $7,500 a piece, I want the Schultz Auto Group to sell as many cars as they can. But the federal government can't be part of that purchase in perpetuity. I mean, the economy is not faltering right now. We don't have to stimulate demand. People are buying cars. And you see the unpopularity of this product because even with a subsidy, they're not moving.
As an elected official and as Congressman, you pass budgets, you vote on things in Congress. What are your concerns that your power is being usurped by some of these executive orders that come out where there's funding that's been cut off that was approved by Congress?
Every president issues many executive orders. Joe Biden issued so many executive orders we didn't have a southern border anymore. DOGE hasn't passed a single law. They've identified things. They're pointing. They're getting us ready to recalibrate the budget of this country. They've canceled contracts and frozen things in their place. But again, when I talk about USAID is a line item. We're led to believe that this is going for one thing, it's going for a complete other thing. There's a reason one side of the political discussion in this country is losing their mind right now. When all we're doing is simple accounting, is the gravy train's coming to an end. And a lot of these NGOs that have no bid contracts and things that were out there and no one knew was happening, they never promote. I mean, when the government didn't promote spending that they were doing, but it was happening anyway, you can be sure that someone's making money off of the back end of that deal, and we're going to get to the bottom of that too. Doge is the biggest revelatory moment that we've had. I mean, and this is a team of people going into each department and actually looking at the books. And what a novel concept that we're actually going to count the money and assign accountability. I had some very pointed discussions with a certain major university in the region this week because the National Institute of Health grants have new guidelines. They're millions and millions of dollars. They go to public institutions all over the country, some private too. They do great research at some of these institutions. But 40% of those grants can be written off for administrator salaries, utility bills, building mortgages. But here's the problem I got, because this big university had a real problem with this and joined some politicians and said we were canceling cancer research, which is a lie, just a bold lie. We're actually going to say the fact, all right, you're hosting this at your university. State taxpayers paid for these buildings, pay these salaries, but then you want the federal government, just because you're hosting this research, to subsidize those same salaries in those same buildings. What's wrong with this picture? Why are we adding extra layers in there for buildings that are paid for on the backs of taxpayers, for salaries that are already paid for on the backs of taxpayers? And then we're borrowing more money because we spend $1.6 trillion more at the federal government than we bring in, and we're adding that to these public institutions with no accountability. And the fact that they said, no, we're going to let you spend 15% of that grant on administrative costs, which would really be in line with what the private sector would do, they're acting like the sky is falling. There's not been accountability in Washington, D.C. in generations. It's here now, and people are going to have to deal with it. Anything else? Thank you very much for being here with us today, and thank you to the Schultz Auto Group for hosting us.
Thank you. Thank you.